One of the darkest chapters of the Indian history is the period of British rule. Jai Hind everyone, I'm Garrett Prakash Mishra and I'm here to lecture on one of the most historical chapter of Indian history, which is British rule. British rule in India, also known as the British Raj, was roughly started up from the 1857 after the Battle of Plassey until 1947 when we finally got the independence. The British rule has shaped the Indian politics, economy, society and national consciousness in a very deep and lasting manner. The British East India Company had came here just for trade purpose and established their first factory at Surat in 1613, but after that their greed get increasing and they started occupying the Indian territory by finding some loopholes in the Indian politics. They had adapted the ideology of the divide and rule to weaken their opponents and strengthen their powers. There were some major positive and negative impacts of the British rule. The positive impacts of the British rule were like that they had introduced railways, telegraphs, postal communication and modern administration that makes the communication more easier. They had contributed a lot in the Indian infrastructure by creating different dams, buildings and colleges. And they had also created a huge reform in Indian modern education. But still, of these positive impacts, there were more negative impacts of the British rule. They were suppressing the Indians. That leads to the national disruption. They had destroyed our cultural heritage. They were made a huge economic gain in our Indian economy, and they were exploiting our political career. That makes us to realize that what is the real value of independence. And after that, the collective efforts of all the Indians leads to the Indian independence in the 15th August 1947. So at last we can conclude by all this that the British economy had left a mixed legacy. There were some positive impacts of the British economy, but still because of that there were more negative impacts that made the British period of one of the most darkest chapter of the Indian history. Thank you, Jay.